Hey, good morning and welcome to Breakthrough Walls. I'm Ken Walls and I'm your host. And today I have attorney Mike Alden. I hope I'm saying his name right. We'll find out in a minute. But hey, this guy is a rock star. He's written multiple best-selling books. You're going to love this dude's energy, his story. Can't wait to hear it. So do me a favor and share this out right now, and we will see you guys in just a minute. All right, I am back. Let me bring Mike on. Mike, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I'm excited to have you here. Did I say your last? It's Alden.
Yeah.
I got it. I mean, how do you screw that up?
Pretty easy.
Right. So Mike, I started this show about 4 years ago, and it was really to help people get unstuck in life, to have a breakthrough. And because we all go through crap in life, and a lot of people get stuck and stay there. And I think by hearing stories of how others have gone through it and got through it, I think it helps people, man. So that's what this is all about.
I agree, man. I think you're right. I think we all have moments where we get stuck in life, whether it's the beginning of our lives or, whether it is, a continuation of getting stuck throughout different, parts of our lives. It happens to all of us. And I think a lot of us need to sometimes, get a little extra motivation. And I think the show that definitely does that.
Yeah, man. So start with telling everybody where you were, like where it all began. Where were you born and raised?
Geez, man, where did it all begin? So it began right here where I'm actually sitting in a town called Beverly, Massachusetts, the birthplace of the American Navy, which is kind of cool. If you're familiar with Salem, Mass, we're actually the next town over where the Salem witch trials. I grew up kind of tough, grew up surrounded by crime, drugs, violence, very, very difficult upbringing the way I grew up. But, you hear this a lot with entrepreneurs and that upbringing and the difficult times that I went through. It was really a gift. It's hard to think of it as a gift when you're going through the things that I went through, when the Salvation Army is, subsidizing, your Christmas or your Thanksgiving. And when your lunch was subsidized by the state and had to stand in a separate line in elementary school, middle school, and high school. And I remember what that was like. I remember, what I was like as a kid going to the grocery store. And, back then, ATM cards weren't really a thing, but you did have a bank card. They weren't called really an ATM card. So it was like your local bank. And I remember, the card getting declined a couple of times when my mom would go shopping, and, it was difficult, and the kids I grew up with weren't really the best of kids. I really wasn't the best kid either, because of, really at the end of the day was certainly a product of my environment. But at the same time, I was really lucky because my parents cared. Right. And I had teachers and I had coaches and I did have athletics that really kind of helped me get through a lot of the difficult things and the paths that I could have gone. They say by the grace of God go I. You either go one way or the other, and I kind of went both at one point. And I decided ultimately that the path of crime was just not for me.
Well, so dude, you just buzzed through an entire life like that.
Yeah, in about 3 minutes, right?
Yeah, but I like back up a little bit and go back to because you mentioned I don't know a lot about it, but you mentioned the Salem witch trial. I remember hearing about that, but like that was a thing, right? And
it's the next town over. Yeah, I mean, so it's a really interesting place to grow up, in Beverly, Mass. In fact, Beverly Farms, Massachusetts. One of the guys from one of the original kind of founders of Beverly Farms also then went on to found Beverly Hills in California. So there's a lot of old money here, a lot of history here. But, like any other town, look, I grew up in the projects and, we grew up in state housing, Section 8, WIC, welfare, that whole thing. And, when you drove through my neighborhood in the daytime, it didn't look that bad at all. In fact, if you've ever been to Compton in the daytime, it doesn't look bad at all either. Right. But there are, it was a difficult place to grow up. But again, I always look back and say, man, I don't think I'd want it any different. Because as a kid, I mentioned those things about the Salvation Army and the WIC and the, state housing and things like that. I never went without a home. There were times when we did go without heat and electricity, but it was usually temporary. I never went without food, although sometimes we did open the fridge and the cabinets were in fact barren. Yeah. But there were a lot worse situations than mine as well. And, a lot of people have reminded me of that. Hey, you think you grew up tough? Well, imagine what it's like growing up in the south side of Chicago. I grew up really tough, like really tough. Yeah. I've been stabbed. I've been shot at. I've been beat up. I've had stuff, it's been a really, really, it was difficult, but there are a lot worse situations as well. I'm here, for a reason, but they call it the gift of adversity. I mean, plain and simple. It really, when you grow up the way I did and you go through stuff in life, it really pales in comparison.
So as a kid, a teenager going through all, and I can relate to so much of that. So going through all of that stuff, you said you were headed into some bad situations. I tell people, hey, I spent my entire teenage years on probation. So
I was on probation.
Yeah, no, I get it. So like when you're going through all of that, did you feel like, I always felt like, I was hanging out, running around with these bad kids, these doing stupid crap. And, but there was I felt like I still had a moral compass that pointed north, northwest, maybe. Sure. But did you feel that, like, you knew you were maybe not supposed to be doing this or that, but you were like, but I know that, I don't know.
The difference between right and wrong. And absolutely. And I think that's a reflection of probably your parents, or at least someone close to you, and for me, it was, look, I've told this story a bunch of times that I'll tell it on the show. I remember, when I was about 15 years old. By the way, the size I am now, I could stand to lose probably about 20 pounds, but I was always a big kid, right? Yeah. And I remember I was 15 years old. I was in Peabody, Massachusetts. And Peabody, Massachusetts is a classic blue-collar town. I wasn't really a basketball player, but we were playing basketball. And these kids knew who I was. This is pre-cell phone, pre-internet. Of course, I might have been in the papers a couple times for football because I was a pretty good athlete. But these kids knew who I was. And I was proud of that. And they knew who I was because I had beat up some other kid pretty bad, a few weeks prior, and it made it all the way over to this other town in Peabody, Massachusetts. And I came home and I told my mom the story. I said, hey, Ma, these kids, they knew who I was. And she said, well, how do they know who you were? And I told her the story. And then she looked at me and she said, is that how you want to be remembered? And that stuck with me. It's like, I'm telling the story now. I'm 47 years old. I'll never forget it. Yeah. My father took me for a long walk on the beach one day, like a proud father, and said, hey, listen, you're really going down the wrong path. You're committing petty crimes, you're fighting, you're stealing, you're doing all the things that a criminal does, but you're not very good at it. If you want to be good at it, let me introduce you to real criminals. Let me introduce you to real gangsters. But let me tell you a little bit about what your life is going to look like. And then he went on to describe what my life would look like of always looking over my shoulder and potentially, going to jail and carrying a weapon and stealing and just living a life of just, fear and anxiety of getting caught. And that isn't really what I wanted to do. So those kind of two moments my parents were divorced. But my father was always there. My mom always cared, even though she was working and doing all these things. So I was fortunate that my parents cared. Now, it's just, it is what it is. And I hate that saying, but in this world today, there are parents that don't care. There are parents that shouldn't have been parents. There are parents that treat their kids like luggage. Yep. And it's really, really sad. And I was very fortunate that my parents did care. I was also fortunate that I had teachers and coaches that really cared about me because they saw that, I do have potential. And, when I talk about, or I think about, my family members, I had a brother that died of an overdose. A kid I grew up with is in jail for life for murder. And I think about, what happened to them and why is it so different for them? And we grew up essentially the same way. And I was just lucky that I did have people that cared for me and gave me that little extra kind of push and also really wanted me to be successful. And here's the other key part is I listened. And I don't know why, but I listened to them. And I did take the advice. You know what? I wasn't always, a good kid, even after some of that advice. And I didn't always do the right thing. But you talk about that moral compass. Yeah. I was instilled values that my parents and again, my teachers and my coaches really put inside of me. Like you said, though, sometimes we veer off, but we do know where the center is.
So growing up, like, did you find yourself in and out of trouble, or you were in trouble? Then eventually as a teenager, you're like, okay, I got to stop this crap now.
Yeah. I mean, I was definitely in and out of trouble a lot. We talked about being on probation. I was on probation when I was a kid. And there was, look, there was all these moments in life. Right. And when one of my brothers who died of an overdose, and his name is Dominic, and people would always say to me, my parents, and would say, hey, you need to go talk to Dominic. And I talk to him until I was blue in the face, and I would tell him the things I need to do. But there's a point in someone's life, and it's really kind of weird when you talk about it at this stage in our lives. But, and I think it can happen at any stage in anyone's life, but it's usually younger, where someone 14, 15 years old, they need to make the decision. You need to make the decision. And so I actually got arrested when I was 14 years old. It made the front page of the paper. It was nothing. I mean, I was on a motorcycle. I got chased by cops. It was crazy. The whole thing was crazy. And I was playing football, and the coach talked about it. And at practice, he says, hear about this crazy kid driving around Beverly like a lunatic or whatever, and cops and all the whole thing. And I was like, well, that was me. Wow. Right. And I was a freshman. Okay. My coach then brought me into the varsity coach's office, and they sat me down and they said, look, if that ever happens again, you're off the team. You'll never have another opportunity. Now, if that were to happen today, there wouldn't even be a talk. You would just be off the team. Yeah. Right. There wasn't any there was no flexibility anymore because of the world that we live in, because everybody's is scrutinizing every action that you take. So I was fortunate that they did bring me in. When I was a senior in high school, I was class president, captain of the football team on my way to college. And I was, the senior year, you always, kind of, take it off a little bit, you're going to college. Well, I was late all the time for my English class. And the same day, my English teacher called my home. Again, no cell phones. Called my home and says, if you don't show up to class, I'm failing you. And then about 10 minutes later, Mike, the head coach, called and said the same thing. And I've confirmed with both of them after, by the way, that it wasn't, this wasn't a concerted effort. They actually did it separately.
Wow.
And now here's the thing. I could have done one of two things. Right. I could have said, I'm not going to show up. Fuck it. Let's just see what happens. Or I show up. Now, if I had decided not to show up, my life would be altered forever.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is those little moments in life. I mean, it kind of goes to my second book, 5% More. It's like those little things that make the big difference in life. And I was just fortunate that I was able to have that kind of moment where I'm like, oh my God, I need to get out of bed, and I need to show up and do the things I need to do, because you talk about your moral compass. I respected authority to a certain degree. I understood the big stick that they had and the power that they had over me if I did make the wrong decision. Whereas a lot of kids growing up the way I did, they're like, they give them the big middle finger and be like, you know what? You don't know what it's like growing up the way I grew up. You don't know what it's like to have an abusive father or abusive mother or a mother who's a drug addict or being shot at and all this other stuff. And they just give up. And so many of the kids that I grew up with and the way I grew up, they all gave up early on, whereas they had a lot of potential. If they had just pushed a little bit more, if they just maybe had that little extra guidance. I was lucky, man, because I did have that little extra guidance. And I had that, the teacher who called and my football coach who called and said, you better show up. If you don't show up, you're going to be kicked off the team. And man, I think about those moments and I get chills thinking about it, because it's that one little thing that changes the trajectory of one's life. One moment.
That's awesome. I totally agree. And I think that you go through, so you get through high school. Obviously you graduated. Right? You graduated.
I graduated 187 in a class of like 2 something. I was class president, captain of the football team with a C- GPA. My daughter doesn't believe me. And the only reason, but my senior year, I essentially had straight A's. Like, how is that possible? Well, my freshman and sophomore year, I was a disaster. Towards the end of my sophomore year, that's when I was 14, 15 years old, right?
Yeah.
I realized, whoa, I'm I have friends that are talking about college, like what's this college thing, and getting recruited, early on for athletics, for football or baseball,
Yeah.
what have you. And so, yeah, I made that decision. Well, I got to turn this stuff around. So I was fortunate that I did have football and baseball, though I got cut my junior year. We talk about that a whole nother time. That's a whole,
Yeah.
it's you can tell it still doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
But I did have athletics, and that got me into college. And once I got into college, I knew what a big deal it was. Like, I knew how important it was. And it wasn't, I didn't get into college just because of my athletics and also because of the things that I'd done. You could see my grades going up, right? I mean, it was pretty obvious that I was changing my life around, but still, if you look at it just on paper, it wasn't good,
Right.
And so I had, not only coaches, but I had, other people in my life that kind of went to bat for me and spoke up for me and did things for me to help me get to where I got. And I just remember being there. I went to Springfield College in Springfield, Mass., the birthplace of American basketball. And I was like, all right, I'm here. I can't screw this up. And I really remember thinking about my first semester. I think I ended up with like a 2.9 GPA or something like that. I'm like, okay, cool. Like,
yeah,
I can hang here. I know that I can at least do the work and get decent grades. I just got to work a little bit harder if I want to, ultimately go to law school.
So, which I know ultimately you did go to law school. You're an attorney and got your Juris Doctorate, which is impressive, man. Because I mean, I know a lot of attorneys. I have so much respect for that. That's something I always thought I wanted to do, but I unlike you, I walked out in 12th grade. I said, I'm done with this. This is ridiculous. But I respect that. I respect what you've accomplished and achieving the JD. So when you're going through college, sounds like you started to settle down a little. You're still pretty intense.
A little bit.
Yeah, but you settled into it though and said, okay, I got to get through this. I got to do this thing. And then you ended up going to law school. What in the world? Number one, you come from no money. You come from I don't want to say poverty, but
oh no, absolute poverty. I mean, we were below the poverty level. Yeah, listen, I lived on state cheese, like I told you. Wow. I mean, again, like having my Christmases and Thanksgivings. Like when I say subsidized, I mean it's more than subsidized. I mean, just they did everything. They delivered the complete turkey dinner and the whole thing. And so, yeah. But here's the thing. Here's the great thing about that. I think about this now, even with where I'm at, or other parents, like middle class parents or upper middle class parents, okay, with kids.
Yeah.
As far as getting any sort of grants or loans, not going to happen. So being poor was actually a great thing for me for college because I got all the grants and I got all the loans. And because of football, this is crazy. Here's the crazy part about it. I got essentially an academic scholarship because they were Division II. I couldn't get an athletic scholarship at the time. Yeah. So they gave me an academic scholarship, which is kind of bizarre because my GPA in high school was horrible. And by the way, I got a 9.10 on my SATs. Like, it wasn't good, right? Wow. But they saw something in me. And they gave that to me. So when I went to Springfield, all in for 4 years, it only cost me $20,000. Law school, that was like, to pay for room and board and stuff. And by the way, I think it was like $45,000 a year just to go there at the time back then in '97. But law school was a little bit different, right? So law school, same thing. I was still relatively poor, but now it's me and I'm paying for it. So in law school, a lot of times in just like any other higher education, whether it be, going to medical school and things like that. I mean, the loans are they're necessary unless you're just independently wealthy. So you're pretty, you're going to get them unless your credit's a complete disaster. So yeah, law school cost about $150,000, maybe a little bit more. And so I borrowed money for that reason, in order to get through law school. And they even allow you to borrow more to live. I went to law school nights, so I was working. So that, gave me, look, as far as time, it was very difficult as far as time was concerned, but it did give me a little bit of freedom, I guess, where I had a little bit of money coming in, but it was also extremely difficult to go to law school nights and work full time.
But you did it. And what do you feel, I feel like it's always something in childhood. It seems like there's something in childhood that pushes us, a person, a place, an event, something that happens that pushes us in the direction that we end up going as adults. What comes to mind when I say that? Was there anything that you feel like, yeah, that kind of made me want to be a lawyer?
Oh, why I wanted to be a lawyer? Oh, yeah. I mean, I remember the power that police had over us, and I remember even back then, just something didn't seem right when cops would just come into our homes. And look, my stepfather was a heroin addict. My next door neighbor was a heroin dealer. And so, I mean, it was pretty common when cops would just come in, and and drugs were just they were everywhere. And so,
Wow.
there was no Fourth Amendment. I mean, there was, but they didn't care because we were poor. So I do remember that, and I just remember at a young age feeling like this isn't right. And so I wanted to further my education, to really learn and understand. Listen, in second grade, kids, and they write down what you want to be. I went back and I saw this. I gotta find it somewhere. It's in storage. But in second grade, I wrote down I wanted to be a lawyer. I didn't even know what a lawyer was. How did I even? I don't even know. I don't even know how I even thought it, because it's usually, I want to be a fireman, a policeman.
Yeah,
a doctor,
right.
Right. I
Yeah.
wrote down lawyer in second grade. So there was something maybe even early on.
Wow.
I mean, in second grade, you could barely speak, that I just knew that's where I wanted to go. Maybe I had met a lawyer, along the way. I'm not really sure, but I tell you this, one of the things that really drove me in growing up the way I did, and it still drives me to this day, and I still have this fear. People talk about this fear. I've seen some people recently talk about it, and I don't think they've really, really appreciate the type of fear that I still have, and I'll always have. And you know what? Some people think you say you need to get over it. No, I think it drives me. People talk about the things that drive you. When you grow up the way I did, when you grow up absolutely poor, when and then it doesn't really get any better. And then years later, I declared bankruptcy years later, so I really know what it's like to be poor, and it's not fun. And it doesn't feel good. And, worrying about, whether you're going to put gas in the gas tank or food on the table is a real fear for so many people, even today. And so that fear drives me. And so when I think about, kind of coming out of the projects or coming out of the neighborhood that I grew up in, that's the thing. I'm like, man, I don't want to be there. And by the way, I've teetered on it as an entrepreneurship, man, like over the past 15 years of running my business. Look, there's been peaks and valleys, and the valleys have been pretty deep, where I'm like pretty close to almost losing everything. And it's scary, but that's also just the way it is. So the thing in my childhood was literally the way I grew up. And also ultimately the chip on my shoulder. I was told I was going to be dead by the time I was 17. Mr. Sheriff, my guidance counselor, told me that college wasn't for everybody, and so I thank him for that. I thank him for the fact that he basically told me that, you should just do something else. You shouldn't even consider college. And I just basically gave him the big middle finger. I'm like, okay, that's what you think? Well, let me show you.
Right.
My girlfriend's mother told me I'd be dead by the time I was 17. You know what? She was right. She was right. I had been shot at already. Listen, look, where I'm from, okay, it's not, gun violence is not a thing. It never has been a thing. And the fact that I got shot at is just like crazy. You know what I mean? I got stabbed in high school. Again, things like this, they don't even make any sense, because I grew up in a pretty affluent area. However, I grew up in the projects of this affluent area. So those things that happened to me, I can understand why my girlfriend's mother would think I was supposed to be dead. But in a way, that still drives me to this day. And it's going to always drive me. Like, I'm always that kid from the project. Look, a lot of people say, hey, don't forget where you came from. Right. And here's the real problem with that statement. Most of us don't forget where we came from, and a lot of us stay there. I'll never forget where I came from, but I'm never going to stay there.
Dude, you nailed it. And I'm going to, Grant Cardone said on my show, he said, I wake up scared every day. So I don't, dude, I do too. I wake up, I don't want to go back there. I know exactly what you're talking about. I find it interesting, though, that you pulled yourself out of it, though, man, and you became an attorney. You obviously, you passed the bar, which I hear is
listen, I missed it the first time.
I know
You and I
that
talked
missed
about
more
this
than
with
once.
Zig Ziglar, right? I learned this from Zig Ziglar, right?
Yeah.
Look, I didn't fail the bar exam the first time, right? I just didn't pass. It was a
Right.
temporary defeat. And look, at the end of the day, the reason why I didn't pass the first time, because I was poor. I had declared bankruptcy my last year in law school. So I
Wow.
needed to actually work so I was essentially poor up until that point in even in many years after. Okay. And so like I had to work. So I couldn't dedicate the 13 weeks that it really takes to study for the bar exam, 10 hours a day, 7 days a week. I missed the bar exam the first time, Ken, by one question.
Oh, dear.
Okay. How do I know this? Well, because usually when that happens, not usually, but when that happens here in the Commonwealth, it gets brought before a committee, and then they review it, and then you usually get brought up. I mean, I had everyone tell me, you usually get brought up. Well, here's the thing. The bar exam is 2 days. First day is multiple choice. Second day is essay. You can't bullshit the second day. You can't bullshit the essays. The second question on the bar exam, here's a crazy part about life and a crazy part about where life may bring you, because you just can't see it at that time. The second question was all about secure transactions. Okay. Now, I didn't even know what that was. I didn't know what commercial paper was. Why? Because I didn't study it in law school, because I didn't have to. And the chances of it being on the bar exam, it hadn't been on the bar exam within the past 20 years. Well, the second question was about some woman who walks into a bank and she passes a bad check and she buys, right? It was this whole thing. I didn't know any of it. I knew right then and there that I was pretty much screwed, right? I knew some basics where I could just maybe get like 1 point or something like that. Here's the crazy part about that. Years later, when I start practicing law, I was working for this company that had a lot of money in merchant reserves, but they didn't have a lot of cash flow, the free cash flow, but they had millions in merchant reserves. They couldn't access it because it's designed basically if the company goes bankrupt, the consumers can get paid. Well, because I had studied secure transactions, I figured out a way to essentially collateralize that, right? With a note, with a simple piece of paper to essentially pull that money out. It stayed there, but we were able to borrow that money and we were able to grow the business. I've done that now multiple times throughout my career here as well, because we've processed hundreds of millions of credit cards. A lot of it is sitting in reserves. People don't realize for every, dollar you're processing, roughly, I don't know, 15 cents of it or so is caught up, right? And so, and 5 cents of that goes into a reserve account, and then it just grows. And a lot of times you don't have access to it. So first time around, didn't pass the bar exam. If I had passed the bar exam, again, talk about what happened, back in the earlier stages of life, my life would be completely different. So it's really, really interesting. Second time around, by the way, Ken, I was still working at that same company. They were open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, a call center doing sales, inbound sales. So I was able to work maybe once a week just to basically cover my health insurance. But I studied for 10 hours a day, 7 days a week for 13 weeks straight. The second time around on the bar exam, I knew that if I didn't even show up the second day, I would have passed. Like, that's how confident I was.
So, okay. And all this time you're working in a call center?
Yeah. It was the greatest job ever.
I don't disagree. It's amazing. But I think that because I've said, like, I'm friends with all the Ziglers, the kids, Zig's kids, right? He's my hero. And you talked about Zig.
Listen, John Ziglar, okay? John Ziglar. He's like the cousin, or what? So I forget exactly. He's in merchant processing. I'll tell you a story about him. So,
oh wow,
in 2010, we got hurt really bad. I just started the business. We're doing millions, and I just got hurt really bad. I lost my merchant processing. It wasn't my fault. It really wasn't. It was just the entire industry, right?
Yep.
John Ziglar. Again, it's Zig's like nephew or something like that.
Sure.
I had merchant processing with him. He ultimately saved my business because I had other accounts with him and he knew who I was personally. I lost all my accounts. They all got shut down because I didn't have a personal relationship with him. I had a personal relationship with John. John says, look, you're good here, but here's the challenge though. I went from doing nothing with him to like $1 million a week. And that's actually a problem in the merchant processing world. Yeah. But it's funny because John actually, saved us. And, the reason why I know Zig and those guys, we did an infomercial with Zig back in the day. And it was, to me, it was like when I got to hang out with Zig and I had dinner with him a few times and, it wasn't like a paid for thing. Like we actually hung out and, the whole family. And to be around him, it was like being around a deity, right? So I just respect him and read all his books, and he lived that life, man. It was awesome just to be with him, and his humor was amazing. Like, he was just such a funny guy. But I really, really enjoyed being around him. But yeah, so John Ziegler, in the early stages of my career here at Blue Vase, he saved my company.
Which is amazing. So with the Zieglers, Tom Ziegler's a good friend of mine. Yep. Julie, his sister, Zig's daughter, she's a client and a dear friend of mine. But I think that when you look at, and Lana Ferguson asks a question in the comments, she says, what a great testimonial. Especially, and this is something that's near and dear to my heart. And that is because I grew up poor. I grew up in the not the projects, but close enough. I've been stabbed. I've been through it all too. And I think that there is this thing. I look at Facebook and the friend requests I've received from people I may have gone to high school with or grew up with, and they're still there. And I'm like, dude, you're 54 years old and you're still hanging out at the bar every weekend, the same bar we hung out in at 16 or 17. Like, what the hell's going on here, man? Like, and I don't accept their friend requests. I can't go there, man. What was it? Do you feel, because I know there are kids that you went to school with, well, they're adults, but there are people you went to school with that are still stuck in your town. They're still stuck there in that same mindset. What do you think gave you the burning desire to say, I'm done with this crap. I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to go make big things happen in the world?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about a little bit earlier. I just didn't want to be poor anymore, man. I didn't want people to look down on me. I didn't want people to think less of me. And to this day, man, people still do that. Look, if you've ever watched television over the past 10 years, you've seen me on television promoting products and services. That's what I've been doing. So I'm an infomercial guy, right? Selling dietary supplements. In fact, one of the supplements is a male sexual health product. So I'm just like, people look at me like I'm just like a huckster. I'm some guy selling dick pills or whatever it is. In fact, I had a family member say that. I was like, hey, by the way, the house you're living in, it's paid for by me. But here's the thing is, and so I've always been, I have a chip on my shoulder. I'm always going to have a chip on my shoulder. And I'm always going to be that insecure kid growing up in the project that everybody looked down on. I'm always going to be that insecure kid that was wearing hand-me-down clothes or had to buy my clothes, at the Salvation Army, or they were in fact donated. And so what drove me and what continues to drive me is I just want to prove to the world, and it could be a problem. I don't know. Psychologically, it might be, but I want to prove to the world that I was that kid. I'm not anymore.
Right.
And that's it. I mean, like, I remember, see, look, the interesting part about Beverly, Massachusetts, where I grew up, like I said, there is, extreme affluence here. Some of the richest people in the world live here in Beverly, Mass. It's a coastal town. Old money is here. Okay. And so I went to elementary school with some of those kids. Like, our school system was a good school system. So they would send, like, super rich kids would go to my school. And so I would go to their homes sometimes, and I would be lucky enough to get invited to a birthday party or what have you, if I didn't like beat them up in the schoolyard. Right. and so I would go there and I'd look at these, and the parents, I could just see it in their eyes. They had, they just looked at me like I was different, because I was different, but I wasn't lesser. I wasn't a lesser human being because I was poor. And by the way, we talk about my parents, like my mom, she worked full time. She went to school nights. She graduated with straight A's. She got her associate's degree. She was always trying to better herself. My father, same thing. He was in the Coast Guard. Look, things happen in life, and you just end up poor. I mean, it is, again, I keep saying it is what it is. That's what happened to them, but it doesn't make us bad people. It doesn't make you lesser of a person. And this is why I empathize with so many people. And you see, the crime rate continuing to rise here in the United States, and people talk about, the race issues and whether or not it's a race issue or what have you. To me, it's more than that. To me, it's truly a socioeconomic thing. Race is a big part of it, but it's also truly, you really are a product of your environment. So I, in a way, kind of empathize with these kids that are growing up and commit crimes because they have nothing else. And not only do they have nothing else, but they don't know where to go. They couldn't see other things. See, my mom, tried everything she could to get me out of the project. She, applied for scholarships and loans to get me to go to like the YMCA and take me out of the projects in the summertime, to show me other things, to go to different areas. And when I did go to these rich neighborhoods in my towns, which by the way, they were just like ranch style houses. I thought they were rich.
Right.
I was like, whoa, like this is what I want. Like I want to be out of here. I don't want to have to worry about, my dad dropping me off several blocks away because the muffler was falling off and the car was all dented and I had to get out the side door and climb through the window because the door wouldn't open. Like, yep. I just didn't want that stuff anymore. And again, when Grant talks about it too, I appreciate what Grant says. But man, as I'm telling you right now, I have that fear today. When I use my credit card, when I go to the grocery store with a debit card, if it gets declined, which happens sometimes here and there, I start to sweat and freak out because I'm like, oh my God,
I can relate, man.
Am I here again? I know I'm not, but it's there. It's always going to be there, man.
I know, it's crazy, man. It does not matter how much money you have if you've experienced that shit. Like it's there. And there are people that can't relate to that too. So, but go back to you graduate law school, you pass the bar exam on the second go around, you smoked it the second time. And then what? You're an attorney now and
my career path was kind of crazy. So mention that call center that I was working at. So yep. I was working at this call center. They were selling dietary supplements over the phone. Okay. Via infomercial. And, I had a friend who referred me there. And, I went there and I interviewed and I showed up in a suit. I was in law school. And I'm telling you, Ken, when you describe a boiler room, it was a boiler room. There were guys on the ankle bracelet there. Okay. Right. So I go there to interview and they tell me that they don't have room for me. Okay. They don't have room for me. So I go around the HR guy. I go into customer service. And I was like, hey, I'm looking for a job. The guy who happened to be running customer service interviewed me, liked me. He started asking me all these legal questions, which I thought was kind of weird. I don't know. Maybe he just didn't think that I was really in law school. So they end up hiring me. Okay. So that company was the same company that when I ultimately passed the bar exam, I ended up working for them in-house. The day, I didn't know any of this happened. I didn't know this was going on. The day I started with them, they were sued by the FTC, the FDA, the IRS came right behind them, and then it went criminal. And so my first day, we were served with a complete asset freeze, with restraining orders, and I didn't even know what that stuff was. I mean, the fax came over and basically said, and we had outside counsel that said, "You guys are done. We're shutting you down." That was my first week practicing law. I didn't even have my BBO number yet, right? When you sign legal documents, you have to put your BBO number. I didn't have. I had to write BBO pending, which is a big, giant, obvious that, hey, this kid just graduated law school, right? Wow. We had outside counsel, of course. It wasn't just me when we first started. And so that was my indoctrination to law. Listen, I went to school in Boston, right? So I went to Suffolk Law Nights. And, the reason why Suffolk has such a great reputation is because they do have a great night program for, people that are working. But I went to school with people that, went to MIT. They went to Harvard. They were already PhDs. They already had careers and other things. And I'm this kid from Springfield College who sold cars. And then I told them that I had to have my federal license expedited because we were in federal court in here in Boston. And so that was my indoctrination to law. And here's the greatest part about it. The story's insane, how the whole thing happened. But I was forced. When you talk about being thrown in the fire, understatement. Yeah. Right. Understatement of what we had, what happened. Like 4 days after we were served with a complete asset freeze, the FTC came through the doors because we actually were able to essentially win, if we want to call it that. But we were able to win with a temporary restraining order so we could actually conduct business. 4 days after that, the 3 or 4 or 5 lawyers from the FTC were coming through, and I'm their in-house lawyer, right? It was like the craziest thing ever. But here's again, the whole point of the story is I was forced to learn that entire business from the ground up and really how it worked and why things were broken and why the FTC thought the way they thought and why the FDA thought the way they thought and why the IRS thought the way they thought. And I was able to understand the mechanics of the business. And then ultimately, when that business shuttered, I started my business in 2008, effectively doing the same thing. Just I learned from all the mistakes they made and didn't make the same ones.
Jeez, man. So you, okay. I'm trying to put myself in your shoes of, I graduate law school. I passed the bar exam. Aren't you thinking like, okay, I want to go save the world, put out my own shingle, be an attorney for the masses. Like I want to go to court and shut these, like, weren't you thinking like that? Like,
yeah, look, I remember I read the book, The Civil Action I finished it in Boston Common, and Jan Schlickman actually lives in Beverly, Massachusetts. Okay.
Wow.
You have this naive thought as a young lawyer that you're going to save the world, right?
Right.
And, that you're going to be this, big lawyer, class action lawyer. It's going to save the consumers and do all these things. And,
right.
And that's kind of it is what I thought I wanted to do. But I was really lucky to even get a job, right out of the gate. The fact that I had a job right out of the gate was just remarkable because, look, I mean, I did well in law school. I was in the top half of my class. I was in the dean's list 3 out of 4 years. And so I was a lot different person then than I was when I was 14, 15, 16, and even in college. So it was that was a different time of my life. And so my grades and everything else looked great. But look, like I said, you have Harvard in Boston. You have, you have Boston College. You have Northeastern. And then you have all these other law schools all over the country. So, as far as competitiveness, it's crazy. Once you make it to that level, it's like, all right, great, congratulations. Okay, so cool, you got your master's. So did everybody else, right? It's a little bit different when you get your Juris Doctorate. But then when you get your Juris Doctorate, then you're like, all right, well, now you're grouped in with all those people too. Right. And a lot of them might be smarter than you and have, a better pedigree than you and maybe even know a lot more people than you. So it was I was just super fortunate to even get the job. I remember talking to my ex-wife. I can visualize this. I remember she was a great negotiator. I met her because we were both in sales and that's when we met. And we were going back and forth about my salary and what I should get. And should they cover my car payment? In fact, they did cover my car payment. I remember that first week and I was like, oh my God. Like I thought I was going to get my car payment covered. I remember talking to someone in finance. I'm like, hey, do you think I'm going to get at least my first payment covered before you guys get shut down?
Wow.
And so, yeah, it was such a great time to do that. But the idea of, changing the world, it's a beautiful utopianistic view, but it's just not reality.
Right. I love that utopianistic. That's awesome. Yeah. So you said you ended up starting your own business in a similar industry. And I know that you've done extremely well with that. What else has been going on? I know you just mentioned that you were on TV. I don't watch television, so I apologize. I may have seen you on TV, but I don't remember seeing.
Yeah, no. So again, we created long form interview style infomercials where I would sit at a desk and I would interview people about their products and services.
Okay.
So I was the host. Yeah. And so I would interview them about their books or about their supplements or about their programs. And, I know, who Dean Graziosi is, but, we actually did Dean's How to Be a Real Estate Millionaire with my old company. And then we did it again for him after that. And so I was able to sit down with people and have just basically like a conversation like you and I are having, obviously edited down so that it makes sense with calls to action and all those other things like that. So that was the primary business. And look, that business is essentially over right now. I mean, nobody is really watching television the way they used to watch television. You still have that big rectangular box that keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger that we put on our walls. But it's different. It's a different medium. We're watching YouTube, Netflix, Hulu, et cetera, on that big giant box. We're no longer just, flicking through the channels. When I started, when I was practicing law, there were a couple hundred channels. Now there's thousands of channels. Yep. And then, in direct TV and all these other things that didn't even exist back then. So it's the competitive nature of direct response infomercials is extremely competitive, and it's just really not as cost effective you still see them. You still do see infomercials, but they're usually kind of legacy brands that maybe have a retail presence that are just trying to continue to advertise and offset their advertising costs with maybe some phone calls, that come in. So that was really kind of been, the primary business, throughout the years. Look, that business will exist and continue to exist for years to come because, we built a massive database with great products and great services. Look, I've been selling dietary supplements, on my own since 2008. That's rare.
Wow.
Because a lot of them are just run and gun. They're kids. They don't know what they're doing. They just, they might white label somebody's product and have no idea about the claims that they're making or even the product itself and the efficacy of the product, et cetera, et cetera. And so we've been doing that for a long time. That business will continue to thrive. It's not going to do 50, 60 million a year like it used to, but we have a pretty solid foundation that if I were to stop, which I effectively have, it still continues to bring in revenue, which, by the way, is way more profitable than it was back then when I was also spending, 50 million a year on advertising.
Right. Right. It's not a good business if you bring in 47 million and spend 50.
I had a guy, a mentor of mine. He said to me, I actually owed him $750,000. I didn't even know who the guy was. He was the silent partner of this manufacturer. He just showed up out of nowhere, right? And his name is Charles Parisi. I tell the story all the time. Charles Parisi from Brooklyn, out of nowhere, right? Shows up, tells me I now owe him the money. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. So he's like, Mike, I want to audit you. So he audits me, and he says, listen, congratulations. He said, and it was like September, October. He said, you've done 33 million this year, right? Congratulations. He says, it's a remarkable thing. Like, I don't care where you are in history, but that's a big number. And knowing what you've done, and like, it's pretty awesome. He said, but what if I told you lost 2 million? Then what if I told you, if you cut that revenue in half and you could actually keep that 2 million, like you could keep that 2 million, which one would you choose? And I go, oh, well, I kind of like the 33 million number. I don't know. So it kind of sounds kind of cool,
yeah.
And I was kind of half joking, but at the same time, there was a big ego thing at a very, when I was younger, I was like, man, I just want a big business. I want all these people and I want all this stuff. And I was just super naive, now looking back on it, I wish I listened to him. And throughout the years, I'm actually staring. You can't see it, but I launched the vodka business through a few years ago, and I've been in that business before, and I really understand that business. And I was telling him about it, and I backed an artist because I love to collect art, and I was telling him about it, and he says, well, how much do you have into the vodka at the time? I go, at the time, it was like, I don't know, 150,000. Do you have the inventory? I said, yeah. He goes, sell it, get out. What's the deal with the art thing? And I said, well, I really like the art. I really think I think we could go big with it. He goes, get out. And I was like, no, man, no way. I lost so much money on those deals.
Yep.
This guy, Charles Parisi, has been in business for a long time. He's older than me. He gets it. He's a seasoned, business professional. And it just really kind of speaks volumes to the old, saying, some of the best experiences are the experiences of others.
So, dude, but that's all we all do that, stupid. I mean, I've had some of the most sage advice of all time, and yeah, old man, whatever, I got this,
right?
And it's like, no, I don't. So talk to me about what you've got going now. What's going on in your world now?
Yeah, it's really interesting, man. We're doing a lot of different things. It's a blessing and a curse for entrepreneurs, right? People used to ask me, what do you do for a living? I say, well, I'm a lawyer by trade. I used to love telling people that. Make sure that they knew I was a lawyer, right? I'm a lawyer by trade. I'm on television. I'm an author. I'm this, I'm that, all this other stuff. And I realized this sounds ridiculous. I'm an entrepreneur, plain and simple, right? I think you either are or you aren't. I was an entrepreneur since the very beginning, since I was a little kid, right? All the stories of, shoveling driveways and in lemonade stands and in paper routes. That's who I am, right? I'm an entrepreneur. Yeah. It's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a great life. And it's also sometimes can be difficult. It can be a very lonely life, and it can be a very stressful life. And also as entrepreneurs, when we see opportunities, right? I call it shiny object syndrome. We say, whoa, look at that thing. Whoa, that thing over there. That looks pretty cool. I think well, you know what? Forget about this thing right here that's actually making money. Let me go over there. Let me chase that thing and see if that thing can make me more money than this thing, right? And I suffer with it, this ailment. But fortunately, probably not as bad as most, but it has cost me millions throughout the years. Here's the interesting thing about like kind of what we're doing right now with my current business. I've written a bunch of books. My books have been very successful. They're sold all over the world. They're translated in multiple languages. I'm a 3-time Wall Street Journal, USA Today bestselling author. I chased the New York Times to try and get on the New York Times because, again, I wanted to tell the world, that I'm not that kid from the projects anymore. Hey, look at me. I'm a New York Times bestselling author, right? Yeah. That 100%, I've said it a million times. It was an ego play for me. That's it, right? I had no other plan, which is a big mistake for my books. I spent all this money, my millions on my books. And I tell people sometimes I wish that I had it back. Here's the interesting thing. I was on a show like yours, probably not as good as yours, right? But I was on a show like yours, and someone happened to hear me talk about the success and the things that I've done for marketing my books. I'm a marketer first. I'm a direct response marketer. Okay. I'm an author second. And so when I wrote my first book, Ask More, Get More, in 2014, I was like, hey, I think, I know I'm going to be a New York Times bestseller. It's just a matter of if I'm going to be number one or not. Okay. My heart was broken pretty quickly. I realized that selling supplements and even selling books, by the way, we've sold millions of books. That's not an exaggeration. We've sold millions of books throughout the years, not all mine, but books for other people. And I was like, well, this is just going to be, a slam dunk for me. Well, my heart was broken. And I realized that there are a lot more, there's a lot more to selling books than selling gadgets and widgets and supplements, and even selling books direct response. In other words, from me to the consumer, right? Not at a store. And so, but when I had my heart broken when I first launched my first book, and no one cared, like nobody cared. And some people like, oh, hey, congratulations. But no one really bought it. And I was like devastated. And it was with Greenleaf, which, by the way, was Grant Cardone's first publisher. I had to figure it out. And so that book, Ask More, Get More, we went on to do great things with that. Again, sold all over the world. I think we hit Wall Street multiple times, the physical list, the digital list. That was then from there, I was able to get a 2-book deal with Wiley & Sons, the 5th largest publisher in the world. My second book was titled 5% More. I mean, the title kind of also speaks for itself. And then my third book with them, it's called Blueprint to Business, an entrepreneur's guide to doing the things that most people won't, right? So those books done some great things. I spent all this money and trying to hit the pinnacle of success of the New York Times. But I realized that also is a world that I may never break through because of who I am, because I'm not accepted into that world, right? And look, I know some of the guys, and we've that have, you can buy 50,000 copies of your own book and you can figure out a way to game the system. It doesn't work like that anymore. They're kind of hip to that stuff. So I had to figure out, how can I sell books to the database, to the people that I've already been selling stuff to, right? How can I incorporate my direct response marketing? In fact, my mentor, Charles Parisi, was the one who told me, Mike, take a look at what you have, market to them and see if you can do well with them. That's what I do with my books. Now, fast forward years later, I'm now doing that for authors. And one of the kind of the giant exclamation points for this and what we're doing for books. And by the way, there's no one in the world that has what I have. There are other people that talk about doing stuff, and there's one or two that have had a fair amount of success, but no one has what I have because I've built it. It's my own, right?
Right.
So, but here's the thing is, Kevin Harrington, and we talked about this, I think, when you and I first met. He's a good friend of mine. He comes from the direct response world. He's an icon in the infomercial space. People don't realize he actually created the infomercial here in the United States. It's such a big deal, but he created. I mean, PBS was doing stuff before him, but he created the infomercial. Okay. Yeah. Kevin and I are friends. We're on the phone a couple of years ago about his book called Mentor to Millions. He tells me he launched it, doesn't do anything. They sold like 2,000 copies. I said, Kevin, you realize that's what I do for authors. He didn't know, right? So I said, listen, let me help you. Gave him a little bit of a discount, took care of him. The following week, we sold 13,000 copies of his book, got him to number 2 in Wall Street Journal, number 1 in the world on Amazon, in the world, against all books, not just number 1 in some subcategory, right? Yeah. And so that's, for me, was almost one of the biggest exclamation points for how difficult it is to actually market and sell books. The last part is the most important part, the selling part, because anybody can market. Marketing is easy. I can market. Look, I wrapped NASCARs with my books, right? That's marketing. I sponsored a guy in the World Series of Poker. That's marketing. That's not selling books. But I was able to sell books for Kevin and for now so many people after this, in an effort to get them to the coveted list that they're looking for, mostly Wall Street, USA Today, because those ones they're not straight numbers. They are. They do look at a lot of different things. So you can't just, any book can't just do it if you just want to pay for it. You have to have some sort of street cred, so to speak. So that's really what we've been doing now. I love it. I really enjoy it because I've lived it. I am an author. I've bled it. I've cried it. I understand it. And I'm continuing to even innovate within this space and using things like AI to continue to sell books for people. So that's it, a long-winded answer to what I'm doing now.
No, I love it. You know, I wrote a book with Jeffrey Gitomer right there, who's the author of the Little Red Book of Selling. And that's a Wiley book. And Jeffrey has a saying, which is kind of funny because I've dealt with a lot of publishers. I've written 7 books myself, and he says, all publishers are liars and whores.
Yeah.
But
he's
I mean,
right, man. He's right.
There's so many that are just full of crap, man. We're going to do this, we're going to do that, and yada, yada, yada. And they don't do anything.
Well, you know why? Is because most of them are living in look, you know, in a few years, we're going to look back on the publishing industry and we're going to say, wow, it's the same thing that happened to Blockbuster, right?
Yep.
It's the same thing that happened to Tower Records, because they are living in an old world. Yep. They don't understand, you know, the current environment. They don't even know what, you know, TikTok is. You know, they don't know what book talk is, right? They don't know some of the advances in the understanding of like, hey, an audiobook now, like, you know, some of the audiobooks that we've worked on, they're scored like movies. Okay. There's not just someone's voice. Okay. So they're really, really behind the times, and they will kind of lean on the fact that, hey, yeah, we're one of the big 5 or the big 3 or whatever. Right. And we're great, but they're not great marketers. Most publishers, and by the way, you know, when you see a lot of these books on the list, I'm usually the one behind it, right? Sometimes we have non-disclosure agreements, so we can't even say who it is. Yeah. But they hire us because they don't know what they're doing, and then you have others that are even resistant to even open their eyes to kind of a new way of thinking about how to market and sell books. You know, I had someone, you know, and by the way, I hired all these quote book marketers back in the day. That's how I also spent a lot of money. And most of them have no idea what they're doing either. You know, because maybe they wrote a children's book and they got it to bestseller on Amazon. Look, I can get any book to bestseller status within 6 hours. I don't care what it is on Amazon, right? That's easy.
It's easy.
And it's hourly. Anybody can do it. There's a great study. A guy took a picture of his foot, put her on a cover, posted it on Amazon, and became a bestseller. I mean, that's a true story. Like that really happened. Yeah. But you're right. So a lot of publishers to this day, I look at them as distribution channels, distribution warehouses, and printing companies. They're not marketers. They have marketing divisions. They should just let them all go because they don't do anything for marketing. They do stuff that used to work in the past. They might think about things like, hey, you know, like look, I worked on a book recently, and they had their book on a billboard in Times Square. Looks cool, man. Looks really, really cool, right?
Wow.
They did the whole thing. And here's the thing: that doesn't sell shit. That doesn't sell books, right? It looks cool. By the way, I could Photoshop that for you and make it look the same way. Okay?
Right.
A lot of people do that stuff. So I've just learned that.
Great. I'm putting my book on Times Square today later on.
I mean, why not? I mean, you know what I mean? You know, so I've seen just a lot of things and spent a lot of money and did a lot. Look, I opened up accounts for Wiley that they didn't even have, you know, for distribution. I've done the Hudson. You and I were talking about this way back, you know, the Hudson News thing, like how I even got connected with Grant Cardone, because years ago it was my book, it was Tony Robbins' book, it was Ryan Blair's book, and it was Grant Cardone's book. Grant Cardone reached out to me, had me on a show, Power Players. I think it was 2015. He's like, who is this kid? I was at his office in Miami, his old office, and you know, and that's how we got connected. It was as a result of my book. So here's the thing about the book, right? Even to this day, even though it's this, you know, kind of thing, this physical thing that seems to be dying a little bit, it is to this day one of the greatest marketing tools that you can have, and it can last forever. Right? It can last forever, and so you could continue to generate income and build businesses off of that. So if you are an entrepreneur, if you are a CEO, if you're someone who's looking to build your business, you can put together a great book, and whatever your expertise is in, and put it out there in the universe and grow a business and be really, really successful with it. But the challenge is now, because it's so easy, with self-publishing. There's so much shit that's out there as well. And people think, well, oh, I wrote a book. And I look at it, I said, no, you wrote a 70-page long story. You don't write a book.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You just wrote some long story. Like I my blog articles are longer than your books. And so that's also a bit of a negative thing. So, but if you really want to make an impact on the world and do it in a way now, because of self-publishing, you can do it in a way that is actually inexpensive. I would suggest actually doing it. Look, and then I'll say this. I don't believe everybody has a book in them. I think that's just companies like Jack Canfield and all these other guys saying, hey, everybody has a book in them. No, they don't. Most people live boring lives, plain and simple. They just live boring lives. Everybody doesn't have a book in them, but a lot of people do and don't realize it. Okay. So the people that do have a book in them should write a book.
I'm an affiliate partner with Mark Victor Hansen, who's one of my dearest friends in the world. And he has a book and a course called You Have a Book in You. And Mark is one of the most positive, uplifting people I've ever known in my life.
Yeah, he's awesome.
And I agree with you. And I also agree with him, but because there are people that should not ever try to write a book. But I think that if people would, and this, it's healing. Like there can be, healing just by sitting down and writing out a story about your life or whatever it is, right? And how you got through the crap. But let me ask, because we're running out of we're out of time. We're over, but I just want to wrap up and ask you a couple quick questions. Number one, what do you think stops people, man? And I'm talking two things that I know they're related. Number one, what stops people from financial success? Number one, and number two, from experiencing real freedom and happiness in life. And I think they're related completely.
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably heard the answer before. I mean, it's one of two things. It's fear of failure or fear of success, and I think I have suffered and even continue to have to check myself on those things, because when you reach a certain level of success, then you are fearful of losing it.
Yeah.
And you're also fearful of what your peers, or like we talk about those friends on Facebook that you grew up with, because they're just rooting, they're just rooting for your failure. And so, you fear that. And so therefore you just kind of stay where you're at because it's a safe place. And that's it. I mean, a lot of people are just fearful of putting themselves out there and being vulnerable and potentially suffering a catastrophic loss or what have you. But unfortunately, look, I was talking to my therapist about this. He doesn't believe in what I'm about to say. Unfortunately, that is a part of it. That is a part of success. You really do have to experience that trauma. I think that it's a universal law of success that you have to, really get beat up pretty bad. And then you have to figure out, whether or not you're going to get up. The challenge is most people don't get up, and the challenge is most people are afraid to get punched in the face, and because it hurts, and it hurts you and you, like physically, if you actually get punched in the face, it hurts to lose things financially. It hurts to take a shot on a business and ultimately have to close it. I've done it over and over and over again.
Yep.
I've shuttered businesses. I've declared bankruptcy. I've been broke. I've been on the brink so many times, and it's not fun. Anybody who tells you that it's fun, or anybody that tells you they like it, is a sociopath. However, any successful person that I know, the really, really successful ones, they've all been there. Look, I was just watching the documentary about Elon Musk and SpaceX. I mean, everyone kind of knows the story, but people don't realize, like, he was weeks away, even days away, of complete catastrophic financial failure, and then he got the government deal of like $1.5 billion. I don't think you have to get there either. I don't think you have to put yourself there. I've met too many people that feel like they manufacture adversity. Don't manufacture adversity. Like if you live a pretty decent life and you're in a good spot, don't intentionally put yourself in some whacked out position so that you can feel the pain. Nobody likes to feel the pain. I try to avoid the pain as much as I can, but I do feel as though it is a necessary part of success.
I so agree with you. And you see it. You see people do that. Like, dude, what are you, like a sadomasochist or So I totally agree, man. This is powerful. I could talk to you all day, man. I know you got other things going on. So michaelalden.net, is that the best place for
Yeah, you go
people?
to michaelalden.net or mikealden.com. You can check me out on Instagram. It's Mike Alden 2012. That's kind of when I got active on social media. So Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, the whole thing. I'm mostly active on Instagram. So it's Mike Alden 2012.
Theodora asks, what's the first step to take when you know you have a book in you?
Yeah, it's a great question, actually. So I didn't necessarily know that I had a book in me either, Theodora. And so when I looked at my first book, Ask More, Get More, it was designed to be sold on television as a lead gen, just like what Dean Graziosi did and a lot of these other guys have done, right? And that's what I did. And so I put it together kind of really quickly in an effort to create an advertisement to see if I could get some interest. And so I definitely got a lot of interest. And then I actually finished writing the book. And as I was writing the book and I had other people read it, that's when I started to get feedback. And then you just kind of know, if you had it. But Ken, you brought up, I know we're running out of time, but you did bring up something, and I'll maybe change my positioning in the future about how I say this, but it is really powerful what you said, because I have a friend who's writing a book, and the whole book is really about her childhood trauma, and whether or not that book sells or not is really almost irrelevant, because it's like what you said, it's cathartic for her, it's therapeutic for her to put it down. Whether she even publishes it or puts it in the public domain, that's really up to her. But it really has helped her kind of get through some of that pain and trauma. And so, selling a book is one thing, but yeah, like you said, if you want to write a book to put your legacy down or put your memoir down so that so future generations can learn about maybe what you went through, then sure, then certainly go ahead and do that.
I mean, I think like you just said, I think that I remember when I wrote my first book, I wrote it like my life my life kind of felt like it depended on it at the moment. I don't know why, but Grant's the reason I wrote the book. He's the one that's, you got to write your book, man. And I'm like, I don't give what am I going to write about? And it was it's the best thing I've ever done in my business.
Well, 10X, right? 10X
Yeah.
for him. I mean, he talks about it in the book itself, right? But I mean, 10X is the book that truly put Grant on the map.
Yep.
I mean, he had obviously some other successes with his previous book, Sell or Be Sold, and things like that. But that book was really the one that really propelled him into stratospheric levels.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because of just that whole, 10X.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree, man. We need to do some more stuff together.
Yeah, let's do it.
I think we need to do some more, but so hang on for me for a minute. I'm going to end this, but Mike, I want to say thank you for coming on and sharing your heart, your wisdom, your transparency is incredible. So I'm very grateful for you coming on and spending time with us.
Likewise. Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll see you guys later. Have a great day.